All right, before we get started, because we are missing both our chair and our vice chair, before we officially start this meeting, can we have somebody make a recommendation to appoint one of our 4 commissioners to serve as chair for today?
I make a motion to, anybody want to do it?
Not me.
Commissioner Gower to be chair for the meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Peter, do you agree?
That's fine. I just want to get the meeting going.
Okay. So we have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Peter is officially the chair of today's meeting.
Okay. Well, why don't we start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Commissioner Marshall can lead us this evening?
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you very much. Michelle, can I have roll call, please?
Sorry. Kathleen Taylor is absent. Peter Gower.
Here.
Ed Hawkins.
Here.
John Marshall.
here.
Paula Levis.
Here.
Alex Felto is absent. Mark Johnson is absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 3, public comment. This item's for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. And I do have a request to speak form from Gordon Gossage. Just a reminder, if anyone else on this item or any of the other public comment items wants to make a comment, please fill out one of these forms and we'll go from there. Gordon, welcome.
Great, thank you. For the record, my name is Gordon Gossage with Regenesis Reno, and our mission is to co-create a community in 5-county Greater Reno that is sustainable, equitable, and regenerative. And tonight I'm actually talking about a subject that is not going to be handled tonight, but I think it's actually one of the most important subjects you're going to cover, you have covered over the past year, and that is the Silver Hills project. In our opinion, Silver Hills is the most appropriate development in terms of hitting a whole lot of different goals. I understand you have a lot of things to weigh, and you have to weigh all the considerations that people have come out in front of you with, besides creating more housing. However, in this case, the listeners have really provided an amazing development. They've really provided working class homes, and that's something we don't have a lot of in this town, as you know. Homes for first responders, homes for teachers, homes for nurses, and people who work in our factories. They're just not going to live in Midtown or South Reno. This is one of the few places they can live. They also, by direction of you guys and many people who requested a lot more missing middle housing, they responded to that. You know, they really responded to it, as did their planners. You know, put together a great plan. And as I know you know, but some people listening might not realize that the missing middle segment is a housing type, anything from 2 units to 50 units. And that's one of the only ways a lot of people who don't have a whole lot of money can afford a house. So they buy a 2-family. Sorry, in Boston we call them 2 families. They buy a duplex, and it creates. If you let the listeners build those, it'll create 2 homes. One for someone who owns, and the second is for someone who rents. So it's an amazing, amazing benefit to the society of our community. And then the final thing is they're also creating an agri-hood. And this is the sustainable portion of what Regenesis Reno is looking to create here in the 5 counties. The agri-hood will produce healthy fruits and vegetables. You know, for the people who live there, they could create a CSA to make some extra money in the neighborhood. And it's going to be beautiful. And people who don't know anything about farming can also learn how to farm, which is a great skill. So thank you very much for your time. I really urge you to approve Silver Hills. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. anyone else wish to make a comment on this general public comment item? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment and we'll move on to item number 4, approval of the minutes. Looking for a motion to approve the January 9th minutes, please.
Mr. Hawkins, I'll make the motion for the minutes.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'd second, but
I'm going to defer to legal on that. We have 3, I believe there's 3 commissioners that can vote on this. One is going to abstain. Do we need to pull this item until we can get a quorum, or does that qualify as a
Let's
quorum?
just wait till we have a quorum. This can take it.
Okay, so we will not take action on that item 4. We'll save that for the next meeting. So we'll move on to item 5, presentation and discussion regarding the renovation zoning code update. Renovation.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, Arlo Stockham, Community Development Director. I'm here tonight just for a very quick update, follow-up to your workshop last week and prior to the City Council workshop scheduled for February 11th. For those in the audience and who weren't participating, the Development Code update involves a whole suite of amendments, focus on a user-friendly code, housing affordability, and sustainable design. I'm not going to go into all those things, just these couple things I wanted to follow up on were really fall out of some of the significant discussion you had last week. The 2 I want to touch on involve the process options that we discussed, as well as a sustainability ordinance and some options moving forward for that. Michelle, if you could pull up the overhead, and if possible, zoom into that table for me, please. So we had some follow-up discussions after the workshop with our consulting team back in Colorado, and then we had a meeting of our technical working group yesterday, and we've had a number of side discussions regarding some of the changes that have been discussed. The first one I want to speak about involves our process options, and there were some proposals that seem to be generally embraced by the Planning Commission to more clearly differentiate site plan reviews and approvals from land use reviews and approvals. Some jurisdictions essentially merge those together in the same type of application, which is basically what our special use permit is now. It's used for land uses as well as site design considerations, while other jurisdictions do split them out and have separate processes with separate findings. So what we heard from the Planning Commission was general support for splitting out those topics. And what we have essentially recommended, which the technical working group was very much in support of, is effectively having 3 levels of review for different types of applications. The 3 levels on the left side of this chart, and I do have copies for anyone in the audience who's interested. The first tier is just an administrative approval. It's basically a building permit. It's stuff you're allowed to do. The second is, we're calling it enhanced administrative review. It essentially would function like our site plan reviews today, where it would be publicly noticed, but it would be a staff decision with conditions of approval. But that decision would be appealable up. So there's public notice, there's appeal rights. It's basically a discretionary review process. We currently do that for site plan reviews, but what this framework would need to do would be to create a new type of application called something like an administrative use permit, where for land use approvals, maybe some of the easier ones, there may even be one on your agenda tonight that could fit in this category. It may not warrant a full public hearing and 2-month process to get to a decision. We could do a cheaper, quicker application to help support small businesses with the safeguard that if neighbors didn't like it, they could appeal it up to council. So that administrative use permit would be new for that level 2 review. The level 3 review is what you do every 2 weeks, and that's public hearings. On the use approval side, we have special use permits. Those would be tailored more to land use approvals. Is a bar appropriate in this location? Is a outdoor storage use appropriate in this location? Those types of things. Under this framework, we would need to create a new process comparable to a special use permit for higher level site plan reviews, maybe call them a major site plan review or something to that effect, that procedurally would look just like a special use permit, but the findings would focus on site design issues. Where, height and compatibility things, residential adjacency maybe in that category. And then the column on the right is flexibility and relief. Essentially, there would be none of that middle tier. The variances, the major deviations, those would all be public hearings in front of this body. And the language in code where some language allows administrative flexibility would be in the first category. As part of this package, there was some interest in tightening up a little bit the administrative flexibility, especially on certain design standards. So I think that's all workable, and the important thing will be setting these thresholds for the different reviews. We're going to have to split out some of our existing public hearings. We're really seeing the big decision is where it bumps from a level 1 review, fully administrative, to the level 2 review, kind of being the most sensitive of those. Possibly pushing down allowed by right decisions for things like housing. To maybe align a little better with City of Sparks. We have much lower thresholds. We require discretionary review at 4 units for a multifamily in most of our zones, and in Sparks they're at 110 units. There may be somewhere in between that would make sense, but that might help with our housing challenges in the region. So that was really the first topic I wanted to share. This was generally embraced by the stakeholders, at least most of them, in our planning process. And our inclination, unless we hear significant concerns tonight, is to bring this concept forward to City Council for their consideration next week. The second topic I wanted to touch on involves a targeted sustainability ordinance. The various development standards in the updated code do expand environmental sustainability significantly, pedestrian and bike circulation, things like that. We heard a significant interest in taking some of the sustainability codes that we have in place now, which are fairly limited and maybe not all they could be, and looking at making something a little more meaningful out of it. At the same time, there's concerns that some of these sustainability features could involve cost for development that may or may not be warranted on any individual site. So we had some discussions. We consulted with our consultants and various others, and it was suggested that the City of Henderson, they have an existing sustainability ordinance that seemed to kind of touch on the balance that we're hearing here, where we want development to do sustainable design, but we want to provide some flexibility. So the various features used to be sustainable might differ from individual sites or different business needs or things like that. The Henderson model, which I've handed out, effectively uses a point system. And there's a whole list of sustainable design features that, depending on their value, get a different point score, and different types of developments have to reach a certain point total. This gets meaningful features with development, but provides pretty good flexibility, so the developments can use those features that may be most appropriate for their project or site. The devil's going to be in the details, honestly, on this. It's in Henderson, it's been in place, I understand, for about a decade. It's gone through at least one round of refinements and revisions, kind of to the points. This is something that we'd want to monitor over time. So we, as a staff, have a general comfort level with this concept. We think it kind of, addresses the various interests we've heard through the process. A couple things that we think could perhaps be added to this, and this was in consultation again with consultants. The interest the commission had in a trip reduction program. We've heard that that's relatively uncommon for local governments to have kind of a trip reduction ordinance. There are some models out there, but not a ton of them. The suggestion to us is that we consider integrating trip reduction and also locational criteria as a component of this sustainability ordinance and kind of use a point system for that as well. If we did that, presumably an infill project that was on a transit route and not a highly auto-dependent location would generally qualify and get the points. And projects in more outlying auto-dependent areas would have to include certain features to reduce trip generation and enhance air quality. So we like that concept of kind of integrating that in as a second piece. And we also would recommend some refinement of either the applicability thresholds or the points to maybe better reflect smaller housing units and affordability a little better and not require as much for smaller units, people targeting more affordable price points. So I think it's fair to say the technical working group in their review wants to spend more time looking at it and studying it, but there was general support for the concept and interest in really looking at those numbers. I think there are a couple folks here who might want to speak on this matter. It's certainly not a final thing, but it's a concept we wanted to share with the group of if a significant change to the draft ordinances that are out for review now. We're looking at these two pieces that I've just handed out as possible approaches to address these topics. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions or take any input you have. We did agendize this, I believe, as an action item in case you wanted to take some type of action. But again, unless we hear substantial objection, we were inclined to bring these concepts forward for discussion with the City Council and further work as we move through the process.
Okay, thank you, Arlo. I am going to open it up for public comment. I believe we have a request to speak form from Melinda Smith.
Melinda Smith with the Builders Association of Northern Nevada. Overall, we've been heavily involved throughout the entire process, attending the technical working group meetings, holding subcommittee meetings within our membership within our association, meeting with industry groups, and providing letters to city staff outlining our feedback at each phase of the process. And today I'm here to provide comment on the sustainability section that was discussed at yesterday's technical working group meeting. And since we've only recently seen this document, we are still exploring and analyzing the potential effects. And I want to make it clear that we are in support of making building more sustainable, along with the incentives to help us do so. However, as you know, with the cost of housing continuing to rise, we want to make sure that this overall process doesn't add to that. So we would like more time to evaluate the impact with our members and provide comment at a later time. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks very much. Anyone else wanting to make a comment on item 5? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission for any questions for Arlo or comments. Just a clarification, I'm not seeing it agendized necessarily as an action item. Are we just having it as its presentation and discussion?
It is agendized as presentation and discussion, but if there's anything you wanted him to pass along, that could be part of the discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Marshall.
Arlo, I'm looking at enhanced tier 2, enhanced administrative.
Yes.
Could you just walk me through again appeals? Is that the actual appeal, or it's decisions that are appealable?
It's decisions that are appealable. What we have in place now that fits in that category are site plan reviews. The process we have for a site plan review, it's a somewhat simpler application than a special use permit. It's a 30-day decision. Staff essentially reviews it. There's public notice, mailed letters sent out. We get calls from any interested neighbors, take that into consideration, and write a decision letter with conditions. And if either the neighbors who got noticed or the applicant doesn't like that decision, they can appeal it up. Right now, we have a step at a hearings examiner, but the package now would have those appeals going to City Council.
Okay, and the So you just may want to change that wording, just so it's clear that it's appealable projects, not appeals.
Yeah, good point. We'll do that.
And have we as a group articulated our positions on that issue of whether or not appeals to the planning commission should be, I guess, the proposal is to bypass the planning commission on all appeals because we'll be getting the boxes that are public hearings except for appeals.
Yes, that was part of the discussion. Were you missing at the workshop?
I think I left, yeah.
Yeah, the draft code has, the draft ordinance as it's written now has site plan review appeals, basically a two-step appeal process. The first step would appeal to planning commission as opposed to the current hearings examiner step, and then that would be appealable to council. We did receive significant input that a one-step appeal was desired by many stakeholders. That was discussed at our workshop, and while the commission didn't take a vote, we heard some general comfort level with those site plan appeals, basically having a one-step appeal straight to city council. So that's the direction we were moving, but if you don't concur with that, let us know and we can pass that along.
Okay, let me if I can ask you just a few other questions on. So it's just the universe that we're talking about is site plan appeals.
Correct. Well, it would be this enhanced administrative level. So currently we have site plan reviews, and if this concept is embraced, we would also have an administrative use permit for some of the smaller, easier land use decisions where it's, a little project or something less impactful. Those would also fit in the same procedural category under this framework.
Okay, and just a question for legal, the city council has to be the stop of last resort. So can we have the planning commission do that? And that be the then action of this final action of the city?
I don't think that would be the final action of the city. I mean, typically, any action of the city is appealable to either muni court or district court.
No, I understand that. But what I'm asking is, does it have to be the city? If the decision is to have one appeal hearing, does it have to be the city council, or could it be the planning commission?
Could be the planning commission. I think the planning commission, it can go to the hearing examiner after the planning commission, so on some minor issues.
I think that would be unprecedented. I don't think we have a single decision in the city where a planning commission is final and not appealable up to the elected officials. It might require some more legal work, whether it's legally possible, but it would be unprecedented. And as staff, we tend to recommend that the final decision should lie with the elected officials.
Understood. So I'm trying to think of some of the appeals that have come to us. Let's say
you probably don't get them. Part of the challenge today, the site plan review appeals go to this hearings examiner.
Yeah.
And our hearings examiner, as it's currently set up, it's a legal person who basically does findings of fact. Did it comply with the law? Did it not comply with the law? So they also hear business license appeals and building permit appeals. To make a long story short, they're not very well equipped to do discretionary land use decisions where it's more of a judgment call and does it meet the findings. So our initial recommendation was that the Planning Commission was better equipped to make those discretionary decisions compared to our hearings examiner. So that's why you don't hear appeals, because under today's code, they don't come to you.
Okay. Why am I thinking that we heard an appeal of a billboard issue? Or did that arise in some funky situation? I think Scenic Nevada had a issue with the administrator. Was that an appeal, or was that just a disagreement with the administrator's decision on a billboard? Does that ring a bell to anybody?
I don't believe an official appeal. It might have been discussion. Those shouldn't come here.
I think you're right. I think that was a problem with an administrative decision approving the billboard, and they brought their concern about that approval to you, but it wasn't an appeal.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Thank you, Arlo. Does anyone else have questions on this sheet?
Other questions or discussion on the memorandum that Arlo handed out and went through? Commissioner Marshall, were you going to go on to the sustainability code? Okay, go ahead.
Excuse me. There is, I think, Arlo, I just wanted to address your last point about maybe incorporating into here locational and what was the other criteria? now? It's
Something
trip
about
reduction.
trip reduction and location.
Yeah, and only because we're wrestling with the same kind of notion up at the basin. And there is a danger that I think we see a little bit in making everything into a point system for some of those like location criteria, where it really is a larger, it's not based on per se, a unit by unit, development by development. Is this designed well? Does it have, energy sufficient building? In my conception, they're a little larger, and they don't necessarily, they're larger policies of where we should build, when we should build, et cetera. And they become less susceptible to achieving those ends if you simply reduce them to a point. And that's a concern I'd express on, I generally, I'm going to defer to Peter and his comments on the sustainability, the approach, but that was my concern. The other thing that we've been working with also, and I don't know if it's any use down here, is coming up with an actual sketch tool that implements something like this, that is very easy for the developer to put in, the kind of the definitions and the location, et cetera, of their development, and then it runs, you don't have to figure out all your various points. It's kind of a neat tool.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Thank you.
Good comments, thank you. Other comments or feedback? Arlo, I would just say relative to the sustainability code example that you provided, that I think I agree with your sentiment that, we're moving in the right direction. I also think that, it is a good opportunity just to take it and digest it, and think about it a little bit further, some of the trade-offs potentially that Commissioner Marshall is talking about, or differences in approaches. So I'm hoping this isn't the last stop or the last opportunity that we have to go through this and provide feedback.
No, not at all. It's kind of an emerging discussion right now. We're planning to, have a number of stops back here as the consolidated draft is put together, and in all likelihood, a couple interim steps where we kind of work with stakeholders and flesh, if there's some agreement in concept, we could put some meat on the bones with some specificity and have something a little more real to review at future meetings.
That'd be great. And, I look forward to hearing more from AGC and the other stakeholders of the working group who are involved in it.
And with all of these, I think we've discussed before, staff is pretty strongly recommending that we do a regular monitoring and check-in once the code's adopted, probably on a 6-month basis to see how it's going, not just for this, but for all of the ordinances. When you do such a big update with so many new things, certain things are bound not to be perfect. So we do want to keep an open mind to refining whatever it is that initially gets adopted.
Great. All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Let's jump down to our public hearing items, and we'll begin with item 6.1, case number LDC 20-00044, Spectrum Dandini mixed-use site time extension. And it looks like, Anne Marie, are you going to kick us off on this, or are we going to request the applicant to give us a kind of an overview of where we're at? Ken, you want to just tell us why we're here on this item.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Ken Crater, one of the members of the partnership on this project. And we have come a long ways on Dandini Spectrum. We have 30% engineering drawings. We've received a hard bid for construction from Joy Engineering. We've identified our hotel developer. He has verbal approval from Hilton to build a home 2 suites on this location. We have done 30% plans on the off-site sewer and off-site water for this project, and I've also gone before the Washoe County Commission and received the $5.8 million roughly bond cap allocation to build a low-income housing tax credit project on this site. It's a large project with 420 apartment units in addition to the hotel, restaurant, and daycare facility. And frankly, there's just a lot of moving parts, but we actually were in contract with a local apartment developer to build out the entire site with 60% AMI units, but unfortunately, he had never done affordable units before, and I think it was a little overwhelming, but we're about a week away from being under contract with another group that's very well-heeled, has a long history in building affordable projects. They're heading in an 80-20 direction, which is similar to what Chip Bulby did on Summit Sierra, where 20% of the units would be 50% area median income or lower. So we're very excited about this project, but we just need a little bit more time to dot the final I and cross the final T. I've also been working with NDOT. They're going to be widening the bridge over Par Dandini and US 395 here. And that will be a great project because it will not only widen the bridge, it'll add sidewalk to the bridge that doesn't exist now. The current bridge was built in the day where NDOT just did not put sidewalk in this location. And I've also approached Amy Cummings with the Regional Transportation Commission to look at signalizing the ramps at the same time the bridge is done. There would never be an easier time. They could put conduit across the bridge, coordinate those 2 signals. And I think most members of the commission knows that that's one of the spots that was identified in the North Valleys as a problem traffic area. Both those ramps operate at a level service F. And I also approached Sheriff Darren Balaam later 2 weeks ago to also help me push RTC to get those ramps signalized. And he said, Ken, sometimes we have to wait 10 minutes just to get out of our parking lot with the backup of traffic on those ramps. So I've continued to pursue this project diligently, and I'm very optimistic that we're finally going to get what I believe to be a great and very exciting project. It'll bring a lot of great apartment units to the North Valleys that are sorely needed, as well as a decent number of affordable units that people can actually afford. And the 80% that aren't affordable, I think, will be closer to workforce housing, unlike most of the projects in the South Meadows that are on the higher end of the rental spectrum, and hope that you grant this request. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Turn it over to staff. Anne Marie, welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. Anne Marie for the record. Just to clarify, this is a request for a 6-month time extension granted by the Planning Commission as allowed by Reno Municipal Code. If approved, the special use permit would have a new expiration date of August 16th, 2020. If the applicant wants additional time, the applicant would need to apply for an amendment to the conditions of approval to extend the timeline. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing item, so I will ask if there are any public comments on this item.
Not on this item.
Okay, anyone wishing to make a public comment? Not seeing anyone rushing up. Okay, I'll close public comment and quickly ask the commissioners if you have any disclosures on this item. Commissioner Hawkins, why don't you start?
Commissioner Hawkins talked with the applicant and went by the site, walked it just to check it out.
Thank you.
Commissioner Marshall, no disclosures.
Commissioner Levis, I had previously visited the site. I didn't realize it was 2.5 years ago, but seems like just more recently than that, but and heard the case.
Thank you. Commissioner Gower, same sentiments as Commissioner Levis. Okay, well, we will then open the public hearing item and see if there are any questions or discussion or a motion. So entertaining all 3 of those. Commissioner Marshall.
Just a quick quick question for staff. Is staff in support of this extension?
Staff is in support of the extension.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I can make a motion.
Please do.
In the where are we? In the matter of LDC 20-00044, based upon compliance with RMC 1806.405I2, I move to approve a 6-month extension for the Spectrum Dandini Mixed-Use Site Special Use Permit LDC 17-00062, subject to the original conditions of approval.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Olivas, all second.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No. Motion carries unanimously 4-0. We will move on to item 6.2 LDC 20-00033, Coffee and Comics, and request a presentation from the applicant's representative. Hi there.
Hi. Good evening. Thanks for having us. So we are applying for a special use permit for Coffee and Comics for beer and wine to be able to serve.
Can you state your name for the record?
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Kevin Wilfon.
And Alex Farside?
Is that the clicker? What do we use? Cool. All right, so just quick about who we are. Like I said, I'm Alex. This is Farside, or I'm Kevin. This is Alex. We're both born and raised here in Reno. Both graduated from UNR. First-time business owners as well. We've known each other since elementary school. And like I said, this is the first business venture that we've gone into. There's a couple of my interests up there of music, economics, good coffee, stuff like that.
And my name is Alex. I have interests in Star Wars, football, Harry Potter, and coffee. So we have a zoning map here of the area. The location's at 940 West Moana. If you're familiar with the area, it's right next door to like Palace the Jade and Delitown. So for the zoning map here, we're currently in a NC zoning, and a restaurant with alcohol sales needs a special use permit in the NC zoning. We also highlighted that there is CC zoning around us, where CC zoning there is no special use permit needed to have a restaurant with alcohol sales. Very close to us, across the street in the CC area, is a Swill, who is a coffee shop that also serves beer and wine. Un Cafe is just to the right of us on this map in the 900 block section of Moana, and I believe they were here about a year ago, and they have a special use permit to serve beer and wine in their cafe. And then just as an example, Palace the Jade next door also has beer and wine. So there's other areas or other businesses in the area that sell beer and wine to go within their restaurants. Residential adjacency. The nearest home is 595 Warren Court. So you can see kind of on the map on here, this is just a shot on Google. And using a Google calculator, it was showing that our location inside of the Lakeside Crossing is 527 feet from that nearest home over on Warren Way. And then just to kind of go back, it's you kind of see the line up on there, that was the closest one compared to a little bit further back on Warren.
Well, so we did present to the Neighborhood Advisory Board already, and some of their concerns they brought up is we only did have breakfast foods at first. We source all our food from Rounds Bakery right up the street. So now after meeting with them, we're going to add sandwiches, some mac and cheese, a vegan option, so we'll have more lunch, dinner options. Our hours of operation are going to be 5:30 a.m. to 8 p.m., weekend 7:30 to 8 p.m., and we have no plans yet to change those. So.
And then just a little bit on Coffee and Comics. We have a few snapshots in the next few slides that go through it. But it's really just designed to be a unique cafe that offers, food, tea, coffee, fraps. But along with that is also comics and collectibles. You can kind of see our comic corner in the section there. It's a larger unit. It's 2,500 square feet. And so we have lots of room for, cafe seating along with bar top seating and couches. It's intended just to be a fun environment for a lot of different type of people. We have free games that are there to play. I think we're up to 43 now. A lot of them were donated by our customers, but stuff like Reno-opoly and Battleship. So they have old comics laying around. We have a permit to play movies in the background, so we have movies going on, and just kind of a fun place for nerds and non-nerds to hang out and have a good time. This is kind of a snapshot in the other direction, looking at the rest of the restaurant. So beer and wine is now more common in cafe-type restaurants. And this will give our customers more options, things to do on the weekends and in evenings after work. Just trying to really expand that so that if somebody wants to come in and sit down and enjoy something and doesn't want coffee at 6 o'clock at night, they have another option as well. And to go along with kind of the beer and wine as far as what we're looking to offer, we're just trying to do like a 4-tap beer selection, and then various selections of canned and bottled beer. We're also looking to do more of a higher end beer and wine selection. We have a lot of collectibles and local art and a lot of things in the store for sale. So we'd rather sell 2 $10 beers than $21 beers. We don't want people really getting drunk there, just something else to kind of offer to go with their meal. No liquor is going to be sold or planning on ever being sold there. So just simple beer and wine. And then Kevin will talk about some safety and procedures.
Yeah, some of the last things, we're going to purchase some of those ID card readers, so we can just swipe IDs and make sure we're not accepting any underage drinking. That's going to be real strict enforcement. When we do ID, then we're going to do like a stamp or a wristband as well, so there's no confusion if someone like, oh, this employee checked my ID a little bit ago. No outside drinks are allowed, and then all employees are going to have the correct alcohol awareness training as well. We'll keep copies of their cards on site as well. Anything else? Cool. Any questions? Thanks.
All right, we will get back to you with any questions. I'm going to turn it over at this point to staff just to run us through a quick presentation here with anything else, and go from there. Anne Marie, welcome back.
Thank you, Commissioners. Anne Marie for the record. Can you zoom that out? Thank you, Michelle. So due to the compatibility of the proposed use with the existing surrounding land uses and development and the distance from residential properties, staff was able to make all of the special use findings and recommends approval of the special use permit subject to conditions. Again, I am happy to answer any questions that the commission might have.
All right, thanks very much. Commissioners, I'll do disclosures before public comment this time. Commissioner Olivas.
Commissioner Olivas, I visited the site.
Commissioner Marshall, familiar with the site?
Commissioner Hawkins visited the site.
Commissioner Gower, familiar with the site, and we will open it up then for public comments. Michelle, do we have any requests to speak forums?
No, we do not.
Anyone wishing to make a comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, and I'll ask if there are any questions. Commissioner Marshall.
Angela, is this a kind of special use permit that is going to change under the new proposals? Would we still be hearing this?
That is a good question. I'd have to look at the new code to see if this would be a special use permit or if this would be a site plan review in this particular zoning district.
Yeah, this to me in maybe NC or other, non-residential zones, this seems to me to be something that we don't necessarily need to hear. But I'm ready to make a motion if there are no other questions.
The floor is yours, Commissioner Marshall. Sorry.
In the matter of LDC 20-00033, Coffee and Comics, based upon compliance with applicable findings, I move to approve the special use permit subject to conditions.
Commissioner Olivas, all second.
All right, have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Good luck with your business.
Strict, I think, is with a T, not a K, just FYI.
Okay, we will move on then to item 6.3, case number LDC 20-00031, Caliber Collision Electric Fence, and request a presentation from the applicant's representative or the applicant. If you could just state your name for the record, please.
Good evening. My name's Keith Kaneko with Electric Guard Dog. Now, we've actually been renamed to Amarok recently, but we're still operating also as a DBA as Electric Guard Dog. And I hear also in attendance is the general manager from Caliber Collision,
Mark Frechette.
All right, thank you for this opportunity. I guess I must first start out by asking and putting yourself in Mark's shoes. So if I may liken this to your place of employment, whether you be a small business owner or a large business owner, or you work in some place of business, to think that you have to walk up every single morning to your office or place of business, scan the property, walk the property to see if there have been any issues or problems during the night before, only to find that your place of business has been compromised. Compromised meaning someone has illegally entered the property, vandalized the property, and stolen property as well. Now picture that happening as frequently as quarterly, monthly. That sinking gut in your feeling, that sinking gut in your stomach, that feeling is what Mark and his employees have to experience on a frequent basis. It is an aspect of security, and that's why I'm here basically to ask for your approval of this particular variance that's under review here. It is a serious hardship that they've been experiencing, and it's something that we can't consider as, oh, it's the cost of doing business. That is not acceptable. When you put it in, think about it from your own perspective, in your own lives, your own businesses, places of business, crime is not something that's accepted. There's a fundamental right to secure what's yours, where you work, and honestly, your personal safety. So I first wanted to just jump into a presentation here which states who we are, what our system is, why we're proposing it, but also clarify kind of more on a property perspective, why this system is needed. Okay, to talk about our company, first of all, we're a market leader in perimeter security. We protect properties that are bound to storing, or businesses that are bound to storing their valuable goods, products, and services in an outdoor yard. Okay, think of Caliber Collision. Their customers' vehicles have to be stored outside. They can store a few in the shop, but the majority of vehicles being serviced have to be in the outdoor environment. There's 4 elements to our system, which I'm going to quickly cover as we go through these slides. There's a deterrence element, defense element, detection, and deployment. And I'll explain why this is such a unique product in that regard. Examples of types of businesses that utilize our security system. I won't read them off, but they're all there. Obviously, Caliber Collision is collision and automotive repair, that category. Caliber Collision, we are a security partner for them nationwide. This is not just focusing on the Reno business here, Reno facility. We secure them throughout the nation as well. When you talk about trucking logistics, we're national accounts, FedEx, UPS. We secure large multinational corporations in that regard, as well as even local mom and pop operations. Here, just a blow up of the site plans. So the red indicates basically our system running concurrent with the perimeter barrier, which happens to be a half wall on 2 sides, and then the other half is going to be chain link around the other sides. Let's talk about criminal access. And there's some topographical issues that enhance the criminal's ability to access the property. And that is shown specifically in red there. There's a vacant property to the south. And there's a slight grade in the property, a slight slope from the front going upwards towards the rear. And as you look at this property, the actual block wall has to be stepped up in height because there's this natural grade. Well, what that allows a criminal class to do is actually, in some points, that wall is effectively only 5 feet tall. Anyone can just look over into the property. And obviously the red dots, those are all the chain link, which was very easy to breach by the criminal class. Here's a photo of the block wall adjacent to that vacant property. So there's a step in there because it gradually slopes up. Anywhere it steps up right there, you can literally just put your head over. I'm tall, but certainly anyone that's 5.5 feet tall can certainly look over into the property and easily scale that wall. So I did a quick crime survey. These are all evident points of entry into the property. So it's not just the block wall, it's obviously the chain link fence, and I have some photos here to show. It's pretty obvious, someone's been climbing over that corner right there. Block wall, there was footprints on the dirt side of the vacant lot. There's also some mud prints that were on the top of the wall as well, which showed that someone had climbed over that wall. Also, they're going underneath the chain link fence adjacent to the dealership next door. Broken glass from a break-in. Again, you're also climbing over the top here of the chain link fence. So let's take a quick moment to talk about what our system is. We have, again, 4 elements. The deterrence element is essentially, it's a kind of a physical infrastructure, and it has a warning sign on there to alert the criminal class, scoping out the property during the daytime or even the evening time as to like, hey, there is an electric fence here on the property. So that's a big deterrent. Certainly then someone is brazen enough to actually try to still break through the perimeter barrier, which in this case is a block wall or a chain link fence, cut through it, climb under it, go over the top of it, whatever the case may be, and contact the fence, there will be a pulse shock deterrent. Every 1.3 seconds, it sends a millisecond pulse of electricity through the system, 7,000 volts, and it will give just a momentary shock to the perpetrator. How does it feel practically? I've had to demonstrate it a number of times. It's not fun, it's not comfortable. It certainly gives you a momentary zap sting, almost akin to a really good hard static shock on a very dry north wind day here in Reno. But the key thing is it's just a millisecond. It's pop and you're off. Every 1.3 seconds, which means basically you could conceivably grab the fence and let go in between those 1.3 seconds and not get shocked. But if you really are hanging on and trying to work your way through the fence or cut it or whatever, you'll receive the millisecond shock. The reality is if someone touches the system, they're trespassing. So the best way to put it is there's a perimeter barrier, and our system is always right behind it. A few inches, 6 inches. Okay, the other elements are detection and deployment. This system fundamentally is an alarm system. It's not just an electric fence. Every 1.3 seconds, it utilizes the fence as a circuit, and it expects a clean return of energy at the brains of the system. If it senses a voltage drop or no voltage, meaning someone cut it or threw a tarp over it, tried to circumvent it, then the system goes into alarm mode. Just like an ADT or other type of monitored alarm, our system makes a call to a central call center advising them that there's been a breach in a particular area of the property. At that point, the operator goes through the call list, fortunately be marked at 2 a.m. in the morning, saying, hey, we detected a breach on the property, what would you like to do? At that point, the onus is upon Caliber Collision to make the determination whether they need to call Reno PD to the site. At that point, deployment would happen. Another key thing to keep in mind, we own and maintain our system. Effectively, we lease/rent the system, meaning we don't just sell it to Caliber Collision and then walk away. We have local techs that come out and do a scheduled maintenance, making sure the system is operating properly, safely, clearing any additional brush or debris around the system, and that's part of the system and contract that they're under. Core components of the system. I'm not going to belabor all this, but the key takeaways from this, it is battery powered, and that's for safety. It's not connected to mains power. It is solely charged by a 12-volt DC battery. Same battery you can go down to AutoZone or Walmart and pick up, that type of battery. How's it perpetually charged? Solar panel. Utilizes an energizer. Obviously, that's how it ramps up 12 volts to the momentary 7,000 volts. But also there's an alarm panel, emergency shut-off, which I'm going to describe here in a bit. And obviously, there's the security fence element built in. So those are the core components. Here's, again, we look at, again, how it's powered. Number one, it's safer design. Number two, it also is for a security aspect. Bad guys can't come in and cut the main power, take the security system down, or windy day, something takes out a power line, grid goes down, the property is not in jeopardy of being broken into at that time. It perpetually stays charged and runs. The key point here is it only operates during non-business hours. Last person out of the property sets the alarm, and the system protects the property through the evening. We meet the standards set by the IEC, International Electrotechnical Commission Standard 60335-2-76, and also the North American standard with the ASTM. These are standards specific to the safe design and operation of electrified security fences in North America. We do comply. From a practical standpoint, there's also been third-party studies done on pulse electricity, specifically from an electrified security fence and its effects on humans and animals, et cetera. Dr. John Webster is the nation's foremost expert in biomedical engineering. He did a full study on this and confirmed that this is medically safe. That's the term that he utilized, that this type of system is medically safe for security purposes. How do you know our system complies with the IEC standard and ASTM standard? Every year we go through certification by a nationally recognized testing laboratory. We utilize TUV Rainland of North America. They're under the auspices of OSHA, and basically they confirm and validate that our system complies with that safety standard. Emergency shutoff. Our systems are always, we will always integrate some type of Knox switch or key switch, which gives emergency personnel the ability to use their master key, walk up, turn the key at the front gate, the whole system goes down. And that way they can easily access the property, have the system powered down. Aesthetics, what does this thing look like? First of all, I want to clarify one point. The security portion of the system does need to be taller than the existing perimeter barrier. As you see in that photo, there's obviously a chain link fence, and then our system would peak up above that. The cute cartoon depiction, I think, makes its point. The same height, it's too easy to scale. Two unequal heights will stop the criminal class from attempting to go over the top. These are just some photos. These are iPhone photos, they're not photoshopped. This is what it is, very visually transparent. Eyes look right through it. It's 20 horizontal strands of 12.5 gauge wire, which is basically like smaller than coat hanger wire. So that just kind of finishes the general portion of our presentation here. But I do want to clarify that there's some unique things with this property. It's a very narrow shaped property. I mean, they have very limited outdoor storage space, and they're kind of maxed out with the number of cars that they have serviced. So there are some very tight constraints there. Regarding just the aspect of police calls, I want to address that because that was in the staff report. It mentioned in the staff report there was a reduction in the number of calls to police. I want to clarify that is not indicative of Caliber Collision not having issues. The truth of the matter is, a lot of times with police reports, they have to be filed by the person that owns the vehicle. Caliber Collision can't file a police report on behalf of a customer that got their car broken into and items stolen inside. So that's often why in this type of business you will not see the calls for a police report. At the same time, the practical reason is Mark here just wants to get back to business. Unfortunately, has to make the call to the customer, say, hey, window's been broken, we will replace it at our cost. But then beyond that, it's just, they want to hurry up and get back to business. Sometimes calling the police after the fact maybe doesn't cross their mind. So I just want to clarify that point, that they have had issues. And actually, in the last year or so, they've had 5 incidents of trespass and broken windows and things stolen from customers' vehicles. The last incident, there were 5 vehicles hit at one time. And there was property stolen from those vehicles. In summary, basically just ask for your strong consideration to approve this variance. We can get bogged down in the technicalities of code and findings and this and that and so forth. I think I've discussed how we've met a lot of those, but at the same time, I want you to please look at this from a practical standpoint. This is a respected local business trying to stay viable, and they're suffering the effects of crime. And the current design of their property, perimeter barriers, is just totally insufficient. And just a matter of time before more and more issues occur on the property. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation. Thank you. We'll get back to you if we have any questions. Okay. I want to turn it over to Sienna. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Sienna Reed, Senior Planner. Michelle, could I get the overhead, please? Okay, so just to kind of focus in on the request before you tonight, there's actually 2 components to the variance request. The first one is to increase allowable fence height from 6 to 8 feet. And then the second aspect is to actually construct a fence within side and rear yards that is not located on lot lines. And so that's for the side and rear lot lines for the particular project site. And so as explained by the applicant, the intent here is to have this variance allow for the construction of an 8-foot tall electrified fence that is located interior to an existing perimeter fencing and wall system. As noted in the staff report, staff is recommending denial of this request really based on noncompliance with variance finding A. And that finding does specify that the property be characterized by extraordinary or exceptional situations such as narrowness, shallowness, or shape, or has exceptional topographic conditions. As you can see on the map overhead, what we have is a kind of flat, quadrilaterally shaped parcel. It's about 0.8 acres in size. And I think the applicant did a good job giving you a sense of the fencing in a visual form that is present on the site. There's code compliant 6-foot chain link fencing, and then also a fence that has been, or excuse me, a wall that has been constructed on top of an existing retaining wall. And also is noted, certainly, given that the materials associated with this variance request really did note that the request is due to help deter crime. We got a lot of information for the Reno Police Department, really trying to take a look not only in the broader area, but also for the site itself. That information is in the staff report. It definitely did show that there's some decreases over time in those types of calls for service that are traditionally related to property crime or theft, but did also note in the staff report and wanted to highlight here that the specific site has had theft and property crime over the years. Those calls for service are documented. And so in presenting this item for your consideration, even though staff couldn't make variance finding A, we did set up kind of different sets of conditions in terms of, if you wanted to move forward with approving a portion of the variance, that would give an option to have an increased fence height that is just those, basically the portions above the existing fence that would allow for barbed wire arms to be installed upon those existing fencing materials, really enhancing security for the property owner and business that's located on the site. If the Planning Commission wanted to approve all portions of the variance request, there is another condition that really is focused on what needs to be in place if the electrified fence is there, and that's really that exterior power shutoff that our fire department was recommending. And it is worth noting in this particular area that there are a variety of other auto-oriented uses. They do have operable vehicles. They're not considered outdoor storage because they are operable on their site. And they have various different types of fencing systems. So there's an auto body shop. It has a perimeter fence that complies with code, and then also an interior fence that is set much further back. It goes up to 6 feet in height and then has additional arms carrying barbed wire above that. We also have another business that has non-compliant fencing that is 6 feet in height, again with the barbed wire arms over that 6-foot fence. And so in thinking about how to move forward with this particular request, definitely did want to note that, that there is fencing in place that is providing additional security for auto-oriented uses in the area. So with that, did want to also note that the Ward 3 Neighborhood Advisory did review the request. They didn't cite any concerns, and I have not received any calls or received any correspondence related to the particular request. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions further at the appropriate time.
All right, thanks very much, Sienna. I will quickly ask commissioners for disclosures. Commissioner Levis?
Commissioner Levis, I visited the site.
Commissioner Marshall, no disclosures.
Commissioner Hawkins, visited the site.
Commissioner Gower, no disclosures. We'll open it up for public comment. Michelle, do you have any requests to speak forms?
No, I do not.
Anyone wishing to make a public comment? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission for questions. Commissioner Levis.
Yeah. Commissioner Levis, I guess I got one question. I mean, what defines a fence? When I'm looking at that system, it's multiple strands of wire. I mean, if there was one strand of wire, I wouldn't see that as being a fence. But when you take a whole bunch of wires and mesh them together in a matrix, then you got a chain link fence. At what point would, how many strands or what are we looking at as defining a fence versus some other sort of security system, interior type of structure?
Thank you. I don't have the exact definition for a fence off the top of my head. If I remember correctly, it does contemplate enclosure of a property by a structure. And I know these details are a little bit difficult to see, but you know, the request before you tonight basically has two fence components. There's a perimeter fence and then an interior electrified fence. And so you know, the existing perimeter fence would be a structure, and in terms of kind of the secure materials around the site that would link in with the existing wall that's on top of a retaining wall, and then as proposed, there would be an inset additional fencing structure carrying the electrified strands.
I guess that's part of my question is when does the interior structure carrying the electricity, when does that become a fence versus a, I mean, we're talking about a variance and it's for fencing, so I'm just trying to gather where that becomes a fence.
Mm-hmm. And maybe I can read the definition per our zoning code. So a fence is basically anything that is artificially constructed that's a barrier of any material or combination of materials. So this would serve as an artificially constructed barrier by that definition.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Sienna, when we're talking about a 6-foot fence with the barbed wire arms, are we also talking about going to 8 foot with barbed wire arms?
That is correct. The condition number 4 that I believe you're referencing would allow up to 8 feet because the variance request was for 8 feet. So,
is it necessary they have to use barbed wire? How about something like to keep the people remembering that they shouldn't have visited this place, and you put a roll of concertina on top? It's very effective.
So the condition is written to allow for non-electrified arms carrying barbed wire on portions of the fence over 6 feet in height. really the intent here is to be consistent with the fencing that we allow in industrial zoning districts, which is limited to barbed wire. The only other more aggressive type of security fencing that is allowed per code is razor ribbon or tape. And that's only allowed in conjunction with a jail or a correctional facility. So really trying to kind of balance the needs here of security on the site in relation to the types of fencing that are specified in code to allow for kind of that additional deterrence from a security perspective. That's why staff landed on the barbed wire arms to be consistent with kind of how we address fencing in other sections of code.
Thank you.
Commissioner Olivas, I'll follow on to that. So is electrified fencing not allowed?
It is not expressly allowed or prohibited.
Can I continue on that line? So are we familiar or with any electrical fences in Reno in similar situations that we've permitted?
Yeah. I did take a look in terms of kind of other jurisdictions in the community and how they regulate or don't necessarily expressly regulate this type of fencing. The city of Sparks does allow for electrified fencing, and similarly to kind of how Reno does with our enhanced fencing for security purposes for industrial zoning districts.
And this is not industrial zoning, is it?
It is community commercial, so while this isn't the zoning map, and I can get that if necessary, the properties surrounding the area are generally in the community commercial or arterial commercial zones. So these are locations that are generally, they may have higher levels of activity on them because of the commercial nature of the uses that could establish there, and also have just general higher levels of activity than you would find in industrial zoning districts.
So the reason why they don't need a variance for the electrical fence is that the code is not clear that it prohibits it?
The variance request is for increased fence height and basically the construction of a fence that is not on lot lines. So the variance is not for an electrified fence per se. It's that the request is desiring a higher fence height to facilitate the electric fence.
I got that. Yeah, I understand that. So I guess my question is the staff's position that should we overcome the variance on height and interior fencing on the second issue, it is otherwise approvable because the electric fence element is consistent with code?
I'm not sure if I exactly follow
if
that
I
question.
weren't seeking a variance, could I erect a 6-foot electrified fence around this property?
That's correct.
So they could replace their external fence with a electrified fence, and that if it was consistent with code, they wouldn't need a variance.
That's correct. There's also options to construct the fence outside of the required setbacks as well. And that is an option that was discussed with the applicant. They wanted to move forward, noting that having a fence closer to the property lines was desired.
I believe we had another variance request for fence height between two very close buildings in the general area.
That was Channel 4 on Harvard and Vassar.
And we denied that variance, right?
No, we approved it.
We approved the variance?
We did.
I don't remember that.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're just in our deliberation phase here. If we call you up for a question, we'll certainly have you come up and answer it. Commissioners, any other questions or discussion? Commissioner Marshall?
I'll kick off the discussion. I think finding A is, as Sienna indicated, is the most troubling one. in terms of finding something unique about this parcel that would justify a variance. There, you know, I can't find any. And so in my mind, this really is a reason why we potentially might want to change the code, not necessarily to vary from it. I think is the key determination and the way at least I look at this, because if we grant this variance, what essentially we're saying is if you have a crime problem, you can have these variances for, you know, you can have additional height for fencing. Or if you just, you know, maybe not even based on crime problems. I'm not certain what it is unique about this parcel that would distinguish it from other requests for similarly situated parcels. And it may be that we think it's a good idea in these circumstances to have a higher fence, but that's the reason to change our code, not to all of a sudden allow variances from the way the code is drafted. So as of right now, at least, I'm with the staff on the finding for A.
Commissioner Levis, I'll follow on to that with a couple examples that we've had in the past, probably before you were here. But I think a key thing that I see in this, and that is extraordinary and exceptional, is pretty strong language for the characteristics of the land. But it's such as exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape. But it's not, those are examples, not necessarily the only situations. And another example that the commission found was specific to crime, and this was at a school, and I forget if anybody here was on that at the time, on the commission at the time, but a school came forward looking for a fence, and they needed a variance for the fence, and it was completely different than this. The room was full of parents and students, and it was very an emotional appeal, and it was about the crime in the neighborhood and about the people in the neighborhood, and that's why they needed the fence. And the commission found that was the exceptional circumstance, even though it wasn't specific to the shape or the characteristics of the physical land, that it was inherent in the nature of the land itself with the crime in the neighborhood, that it was exceptional enough. And I think one significant difference was the emotional aspect of it that a lot of people were talking about. So I would, and I'm not saying I'm there necessarily, but to go along with your discussion, I think that if this is a high crime area, and if that is an exceptional circumstance in itself, that could qualify.
Thank you. Commissioner Hawkins, did you want to follow on with anything?
Sienna? Now, did I read my package right? We can take the fence to 8 foot with barbed wire arms, and we can, and if that's allowed, are we allowing also the hot wire in close proximity to the outer perimeter of the fence?
So should the Planning Commission, move forward with, granting of variances, there's 2 conditions. Condition number 4 would allow for 8 feet with the barbed wire arms over the conventional fencing or wall materials that are up to 6 feet, and that would be non-electrified. Should the Planning Commission be able to make the variance findings for all portions of the variance, it's really that second one that allows for a fence not to be constructed on lot lines, that is structured in the conditions to allow for electrification up to 8 feet in height. So.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I forgot I have one more question for
Sure.
Sienna.
Sure.
Sienna, why is the applicant the fencing company?
I would defer that question to the applicant and the business owner. We basically, we take applications in, and if
Are they acting as representative of the property
they
owner?
submit, their appropriate documentation that the property owner is, on board with the application, then we do accept them from a variety of applicants.
So there is sufficient interest of this applicant in the property to have standing as a applicant for a variance?
The property owner also has to sign an affidavit, so there's two affidavits that have to be signed in order to accept the application. So the property owner has signed as the owner, and he authorizes the applicant, which is the fence company, to represent him as their representative.
So it's, the fence company is really the representative, not the permittee per se.
They're serving as the owner's representative.
Okay.
And I would put them in as more of the technical expert.
Thank you.
I would just follow on with a comment. Similar to other variances that we've seen, it's a variance, to me, a lot of times identifies not necessarily a deficiency, but maybe an area of our code that needs a little bit more attention, or it identifies a circumstance where it's outside of things that we normally deal with. And I understand the situation of the property, and I appreciate the point, Commissioner Olivas, that you brought up with the fence and the school and the extraordinary or exceptional situation that was created just by the amount of crime in that area and relative to that use also. So I think that is something else to consider, as part of this finding A, in addition to the topographic conditions, because, I think what we're concerned with as a city is creating a precedent with these variances. If we say that, okay, this variance, we're okay with it. It deviates from what we're looking for in code. But then it's kind of like, Commissioner Marshall, you brought up a variance that we looked at before. I mean, that's kind of what we get into is, well, what do we do on the last one? Well, what do we do on the last one? It's okay if we approve the last one. And I know we've had this conversation before. A variance is, you have a very specific set of findings that you're trying to make, these exceptional, extraordinary situations, and the examples here with narrowness or shallowness. And I agree with Sienna that, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't really meet any of those exceptional topographic or site layout type constraints that might qualify it for a variance in another situation. But I do wonder a little bit, to the point that Commissioner Olivas, you were getting at with the crime in the area. And I think I'm in the same boat as you. I'm not quite there. And what I also don't want to see is that, to me, this looked like a pretty nice product. I don't want to see us necessarily get into a situation where we've got chain link fence and barbed wire all over the place either. I mean, I think this is a fairly attractive alternative. So I think there's an opportunity to look at this similar to a variance request that we had for a drive-through sign, if you remember that one, where we looked at it, looked at our code and said, is this something that, we need to take a closer look at? I don't know if 8-foot electrified fences in certain areas are more appropriate than in others, but, as a city, if we're really experiencing this type of a crime problem, can we identify those areas? Are there certain zones? Are there certain uses that are more susceptible? I mean, this is a particular use that has property outside, so it's, attracting that type of activity. As a city, can we look at that more holistically as opposed to just, taking a kind of a one-time crack at it? Those are my thoughts on it.
Commissioner Olivas, I'd add to that a little bit too. I think that, and Commissioner Marshall touched on it, I guess I don't see staff's reluctance for the electrification and putting that condition, because if we can overcome the hurdle to make it to 8 feet, what's the difference between barbed wire or the electrification? It's not prohibited. It's not, if we can go to 8 feet, then I don't know that we should condition them either way. This might actually have a better look than barbed wire in the first place. So there might be other reasons why staff wants to avoid the electrification issue. I don't know enough about that, but I think that it might look better if we can overcome that hurdle in the first place.
Variances are tough ones, you know, it's, yeah, they're tough ones. Any other thoughts on this, commissioners? Commissioner Marshall?
If I might, I just, you know, I can't get to granting a variance. I just want to explain a little bit to the applicants that really we're facing two distinct policy choices here between how we deal with variances and what they say about how we apply our code, and then your specific situation, which, you know, I think we all are empathetic with your and sympathetic with your with where you are and what's happening, and that's, you can kind of hear what we're trying to balance. I'm kind of coming down on, I think, you know, quite honestly, there are other things you can do with your property. Either move the fence back. You can, you know, if you really, you know, this is just probably a cheaper solution than others, like constructing a building to house your cars that you're subject to. And so I can't find that there's the necessary finding of the characteristics of the particular site drives the need to have a variance. It's just, you need a solution to your crime problem. And I don't think the variance is the right way to do that. So I would, you know, I'm just explaining to you my kind of thoughts. And so it really is, to me, a reason why we may want to look at our code and say, is it, in these circumstances, is there a reason to change the code to allow what you're asking for everybody, not just to go through variance process? Because I think a lot of people look at the variance process and think, you know, I'm certain the application fees are not cheap. And so are we saying the only people that really going to pursue this are those who are financed enough to have a variance? And when there's potentially other options available, I don't think that's the way we should direct our application of our code in this circumstance. So those are just further thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marshall. Well, if there's no other discussion or questions, I'll entertain a motion at this point.
No one is going to make a motion. I will make a motion just to move us along, if that's okay. Let me get to the right page. On the matter of LDC 20-00031, caliber collision electric fence. Based upon non-compliance with applicable findings, I move to deny the variance as I am unable to make the following variance finding, in particular A and B. That's my motion.
Thank you. I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Hawkins, second, and I can make I can't make the findings A or B.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I would just, you know, echo the comments, and, you know, it's a circumstance just like a lot of the other variances that we're looking for a solution to a problem, but the problem potentially exists broader than this individual site. And I think there are either mechanisms that we can use to address the situation on the site differently, or if this is the best solution, then as Commissioner Marshall put it, can we identify ways to enable this solution more broadly in the city to help other property owners and other businesses reach the same solution without going through the variance process and creating the precedent which may not, you know, be applicable in the future. So with that said, I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, so the motion carries unanimously.
Do you need to read appeal?
Read the appeal? Okay, let me get to that.
Do we need to?
Yes.
Okay. The appeal process, which is also found in the top portion of the agenda packet, Is any final action, not including recommendations or failure to take action by the Planning Commission, may be appealed to the Reno City Council by the applicant, the mayor or a city council member, or any person who is aggrieved by the action or inaction. An appeal, together with fees, must be filed with the city clerk within 10 calendar days starting on the day after written notice of the action is filed with the city clerk. And if the 10th calendar day falls on a weekend or holiday when the clerk's office is not open, the appeal may be filed on the next business day. So we will move on then to item 7, which is Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Liaison Report. And I do not have anything to report on that. Our next meeting is forthcoming in the next 2 weeks, I believe. Staff announcements.
Thank you, Angela Foos, Planning Manager. Just as a heads up, next Tuesday, we will be holding a city council meeting, and that will be specific to the zoning code update. So the intent is to spend a good 4 or 5 hours with city council, basically going through a similar workshop that the Planning Commission went through, and Arlo will be providing the feedback from this Planning Commission and presenting that to council. We also have...
Angela, I'm sorry, when is that?
That is Tuesday, February 11th, which is next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, okay, so...
And that meeting
kind of
starts...
operates as a deadline to get some comments to Arlo if we have any that weren't articulated before.
That would be great. And I will be taking forward your fence comments. That's actually something that we have talked about at the staff level. And so this is good feedback to pass on, that this would be something we should be looking at as part of the zoning code update. Other items, we had 2 cases that were appealed to City Council. One was the Verdi Boat and RV. Planning Commission voted to deny that project. That has been appealed. That will go to City Council next Wednesday. And then the other project that was appealed was the Majestic Special Use Permit. That was in that industrial project that was on North Virginia, that was adjacent to a single-family home that the Planning Commission denied. And that has been appealed and will also go to City Council next Wednesday on appeal. So I'll have updates for you at our next Planning Commission meeting on the outcome of those projects.
And I apologize, commissioners and staff. I skipped over a couple of things that I did want to bring up actually in item number 7 and legal. I don't know if we can go backwards or if I should bring those up under another agenda item.
You can go backwards.
Okay.
Just reopen the item, sure.
Okay. I'm going to digress then quickly to item 7, the regional planning update. So we actually did have a couple of significant items on that on our last meeting. I need to look backwards, not just forwards. The Regional Planning Commission did find Daybreak in conformance with the regional plan. There was a lot of discussion on that, a lot of back and forth, but the decision was made by the commission to find it in conformance. And then we had a comment tonight about Silver Hills. We saw that one also. That's in the county, but it has, some influence on the city, obviously being so close there. And the commission, if I remember right, did not find that one in conformance. So we were split pretty evenly, 5-4 on the decision on that one. Daybreak was similar. It was a split decision, I believe 6-3, if I remember right.
Was it the county that, with the 3 no votes, or were there?
It was the county, yeah. Thank you for that digression. So I think that puts us at item 9, Commissioner suggestions for future agenda items. Commissioner Hawkins.
Well, I wanted to talk to Angie about our upcoming meeting in 2 weeks. That's okay.
Do we need to make it longer?
Looking at my schedule for the 19th.
Yes.
It looks like a heck of a night. And how's it going to boil down? Basically, are we going to shut it down at 1 o'clock like we did a couple of them, or are we going further past that?
That will be at the discretion of the Planning Commission.
Okay.
As a heads up, we will likely be starting that meeting either at 5 or 5:30. We'll do an earlier start time. There's a couple policy agenda items that are not project-specific, but we will need to hold, I think we're going to have to agendize you guys as a separate board. I believe it's is it the CIP board? Refresh my memory, Michelle. Police impact fees.
The CIP is going in March.
Okay.
So we're not doing the 2 meetings on February 19th.
Okay.
We're just having the regular planning commission meeting, and I believe that meeting is starting at 6.
At 6, okay. We'll be in touch if we need to push that back to an earlier time, but it sounds like we're just going to start at 6.
Just, it's difficult for me to get here at 5 particularly for on Wednesdays.
Okay.
I apologize for making you all wait, but I couldn't get out of work until 5, and it takes me an hour plus to get here.
Okay. We will make sure we have a quorum before we confirm that meeting. But at this point, it looks like everyone, I don't believe anyone has said they are not able to be here.
I did send out emails, and I've only heard back from 3.
Okay.
Okay, so get back to Michelle. You're going to be there or not be there. Move on to item 10, public comment. This item's for either public comment on any action item or any general public comment. There's nobody left in the chambers, so we'll assume that there is no public comment. So I'll ask for a motion to adjourn item 11.
Second.
All those in favor?
Good night.
Good night.